Welcome, everybody, to the Three Gun Show. I'm your host, Dave Hartman, and this is episode 317, and this is a good one. It's short, bite-sized, but it's good. If you remember 2 episodes ago, I had my friend Nephi Cole, who is the Director of Government Relations stateside, something or other, at the National Shooting Sports Foundation on the podcast. And, he ran us down like how all this stuff works in state legislators, legislations, how the bills become a law. And we covered a little bit of that here too. And we're talking about some actionable things. So things you should be paying attention to right now. And that's the reason we're doing this. I got so much great feedback from having Nephi on a couple of weeks ago that we're gonna try to have Nephi on more often to talk to us about all the things that are going on in the legislative space, bills and things like that are going to be happening and stuff that we need to be paying attention to. And the reason is I don't like politics. I don't like talking about politics because I get frustrated because I look at things like pretty black and white, right and wrong. But my friend Nephi has a great way of explaining things and talking about the gray areas and how we can move the ball forward on firearms rights, hunting rights, et cetera, things that we care about. And these affect all of us here at the Three Gun Show, whether we pay attention to them or not. At the Three Gun Show, these affect all of us here at the Three Gun Show community. How about that? Whether we pay attention to them or not. So I think after a few years of doing this podcast, 7 years almost now, we should start paying attention. So I've talked to Nephi, and we decided that whenever he has updates, we're going to have him on the show, and we're going to talk about these things. But we're still going to be bringing you that normal, good competition shooting content that you've come to know and love. So these will be little updates here and there. Important stuff that we need to pay attention to. So when you do see Nephi as the guest on one of the podcasts, make sure you pay attention here. So this week we talk about several bills to watch in Colorado, Nebraska, South Dakota, Utah, Idaho, and Wyoming. And if those aren't your states, pay attention anyway, because you might be seeing something similar coming to your state, because these good pieces of legislation, as you know, we're talking about the FIND Act in this podcast, the Firearms in Financial Industry Non-Discrimination Act. That is something that's catching on in a lot of states. Texas, I know, has one with a lot of teeth, and they're trying to get one passed in South Dakota. We have one here in Wyoming that needs a little bit more massaging to have some teeth added to it. So there's probably going to be another one coming soon. But these are the types of things we, as gun owners, as firearms enthusiasts, need to pay attention to, because they are happening whether we like them or not, and we should probably pay attention. So without further ado, here's Nephi Cole, and he's going to give us the state legislative update. Nephi, welcome back to the show.
Dave, it's awesome to be here.
It's great to have you again. So for the listeners, it seems like you were just on recently, because I published the episode with the event of SHOT Show, but it's been several months since we talked. So what have you been up to since SHOT Show?
I've been living in South Dakota, Dave, and so when I say it's great to be here, by here I mean I'm sitting in a rented Toyota Corolla outside of a bar in Pierce, South Dakota, where I've been visiting with legislators talking about different legislation in South Dakota, and honestly, this is what I do for NFSF is I do government relations, and that means when we're out trying to get bills passed that we think are good for shooting sports, good for the industry, we're out there, beating the bushes and trying to get people on board with what we think is the right thing to do. So that's what I'm doing, talking to lobbyists and talking to legislators and talking to the governor here in South Dakota and trying to get people pointed in the right direction with some good legislation.
Well, that's exciting. So you have like a territory you cover, right?
Yeah. So for the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is NFSF SHOT Show, my title is Director of Government Relations and State Affairs for the Rocky Mountains and the Upper Midwest. I cover 9 states. And so that's going to be everything from basically the Canadian border down to, through Colorado. And then I cover the Dakotas and Nebraska, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, so this kind of chunk of the country. And then I also, I worked for a governor before, so I go to all of these governors events. So anytime we get a bunch of Republican governors or national governors all in a room together at some big meeting, I'll go to all of those events and represent the industry. And then I also work with state associations of fish and wildlife agencies. And so for those of you that hunt or work with any type of state agency that owns ranges and things like that, I'll go to these conferences with all the directors of these agencies. And, we try and work with them to make sure that they're implementing regulations and in such a way that we think is good for the industry. That's, honestly, I'm a huge fan of shooting sports. So it's trying to get them to spend their money on ranges and spend their money on competitions that further hunting and shooting sports. So that's what I do. It's my job.
Well, I really like that aspect of it because, as you pointed out on the show when you're on initially, is there's a lot of money out there that comes from like the Pittman-Robertson Act, so tax based on the ammunition and firearms and things like that we as enthusiasts purchase, and you kind of encourage a lot of governments to reinvest that money back into resources that we can use as shooters, including like ranges and things of that nature.
Yep. In fact, there's one of the reasons I'm in South Dakota. I'll testify in the next couple days, actually, on a bill here. South Dakota has a bill. It's called Senate Bill 175 in South Dakota, which is a bill that empowers South Dakota Game Fish and Parks to spend $2.5 million as part of building a $10 million range outside of Rapid City. So that range, those of you who have been to Cameo Shooting Sports Complex near Grand Junction, Colorado, this is a range that Governor Kristi Noem in South Dakota is hoping to get built just outside Rapid City. So it'll be very similar to Cameo. It's going to be 10 miles outside Rapid City. It's going to be a world-class facility with the same types of amenities, the same types of ranges that you have at Cameo. And so we're here, with like a bunch of other bills trying to get the legislature in South Dakota to support that bill. So those of you who are around the South Dakota area, or even if you're not, if you have business connections to South Dakota, this is a great opportunity to reach out to legislators in South Dakota and send them a respectful note and say, this is a great way to spend your Pittman-Robertson money. This is a great way to spend your economic development money. You build a range like this in a community like Rapid City, where you have such a great firearms community in the Black Hills. You're gonna see growth in hunting and the shooting sports. You're gonna see competitions coming in. So that's how we would like people ideally to spend some of that tax money that comes from industry. So it's over $1 billion a year now, and
wow.
We think some of that should be going back out.
Yeah, I completely agree. After visiting the Cameo Shooting Center in Grand Junction, I 100% agree. Like it would be fantastic to have something like that in every one of these Western states, or every one of these friendly states that we can utilize and go to matches, events, things like Comp Expo, stuff like that. So when are we working on Wyoming?
So Wyoming's a slow year. So the states have different activities. Wyoming's going to have a couple of different matches this year. I know that the state is sponsoring, but I don't know what NFSF participation in those is going to be yet. In Wyoming, it's what they call a 20-day session. So the legislature this year just basically needs to do a budget. So we don't see anything big coming in Wyoming. The big states this year, in terms of people that are doing stuff that's going to affect the industry in both positive and negative ways, we're really in my region. We're really watching states like South Dakota, states like Colorado. There's some stuff that's happening there. So in South Dakota, just briefly, in addition to working on the Governor's Range project here, we're also working on what we call the Financial Industry Non-Discrimination Act in South Dakota. And that bill is probably the most important bill for the industry. What that bill does is it says there are certain financial service providers, those would be banks and credit card processors, they have policies where they're policies that they will not do business with firearms companies. And what the FIND Act, which is what we call the Financial Industry Non-Discrimination Act, what it does is it says if you have a categorical discrimination policy against firearms entities, so basically you're saying, yeah, we're a bank, but we will not work with anybody that sells or manufactures firearms. Well, if that's the case, and you have that policy, what the FIND Act does is it says, okay, then the state's not going to bank with you. So what it does in South Dakota is it says if you're going to discriminate against the Second Amendment and say that our values aren't the Second Amendment, well, then the state should be able to say, well, okay, we'd like to bank with banks who do value the Second Amendment and value the firearms community, and that's hopefully we'll pass that bill this year. There's a lot of opposition to it from big banks, and we hope that we can overcome it, because honestly, banks should be making decisions like that for financial reasons, not for political reasons. And that's the reason, that's what we're seeing right now. This push against the firearms industry has nothing to do with financial viability. It has everything to do with, politics.
Yeah. And controlling money is a great way to destroy people and those people that you don't agree with. I mean, look at like for example, the thing that's going on right now with Gofundme, where they took $10 million in donations from individuals, and now they're saying that they're not going to pay it out to the truckers that are protesting COVID lockdowns in Canada. That's a huge amount of control for one organization to have and to be wielding for political purposes. On that same note, like I personally have been affected in a couple businesses that I'm, the Three Gun Show, for example, when I was looking for banking for the Three Gun Show, it was tough to get credit card processing to sell the T-shirts and the scopes that we sell on the website and things like that, and other gun parts, and they're not even firearms. Like I'm not even firearms. It's just firearms adjacent. And because gun is in the name of, I didn't realize that Three Gun Show, like people would see gun show and like, that's all that they, people that are outside of competitive shooting, that's all that they would see. And they kind of equate it with a gun show. They're like, well, you're going to gun shows. I'm like, no, that's not it. They're like, well, you're holding gun shows. I'm like, no, that's not it. Yeah. And I've been I'm sorry. I've experienced that discrimination. So having a FIND Act with some teeth in it would be, is a much better situation.
Yeah. So we passed the act in Texas, and the similar act, we have it running in Utah, South Dakota, Ohio, Indiana, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Georgia is where we're working it this year. So my colleagues and I are working in all these states, and it's really been a dogfight. And this one seems to have the right, negative consequences for those big banks, which is, they're not as scared about, making an individual unhappy as they are about not being able to have those massive, potentially, $100 million type, municipal bonds and things like that. And it's really important. When you look at the financial industry, there has been an effort, and I think we talked about this on your last show, since 2013, to starve the firearms industry of access to the finance world. And in the modern economy that we live in, if you can't transmit money, if you can't use credit cards, if you can't get financing, you're literally shut out of economic viability. And it's just not appropriate. I mean, what we're talking about, and this is kind of what we talk about when we were dealing with the FIND Act, is these are legal businesses. In fact, the firearms industry is the only industry that exists. It is absolutely essential in order for you to exercise your Second Amendment right. Mm-hmm. Now, I know people are going to say that about, well, what about this industry that's related to some other constitutionally protected right? If you think about it, this is the only industry where, for say, if we get rid of the firearms industry, you can't exercise your Second Amendment right. And so that's why, it is an opportunity for people to choke off, your ability to keep and bear arms. And, regardless of whatever reason you choose to purchase a firearm. And, and we've seen it in other states. And, when these opportunities are lost, when you lose access to locations to shoot, when you lose access to the tools to participate, it's really hard to get those things back. And that kind of brings up some stuff that we're working on in the state of Colorado. In Colorado, a couple of bills that were critical there. This year we were able to testify and able to beat a prohibition. There was a bill that was proposed that would prohibit people from hunting mountain lions, bobcats, and lynx. And we were able to testify on that bill, and a lot of other great organizations did. And we were able to, that bill was defeated in committee. And that's important because once it's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts. And once you see somebody, you may not be somebody that wants to hunt, large cats. That's fine. But the problem is once you cut off one of those opportunities, the next one's just around the corner. We truly do know this. They'll come for something else. And so you may be an elk hunter today, but you might not be an elk hunter tomorrow if you don't support the rights of somebody who hunts bobcat and lynx. And so it's important that we all stick together and work with each other. The other bill that's important in Colorado that we're working on, you and I have talked about this already, is House Bill 1145, the magazine ban exception for competition. And this bill actually came about talking with a group of bipartisan group of legislators in Colorado. So it was both Republicans and Democrats, and saying look, what can we do better? Because we know that we have competitions in the state, and we need our competitors to be able to have a level of confidence that they that we're going to be able to keep competing and do it the right way. And Perry Wills, a legislator of the Grand Junction area, stepped up and said, like this idea. A competitor, Courtney Gray, said, well, what if we had, there are already exceptions for standard capacity magazines to have those in Colorado. Can't we just have an exception that says it's okay if you're a sports shooter to have access to those, so that we don't have to kind of worry about this the way that we have in the past? To their credit, the legislature in Colorado stepped up, and they actually have a bill. It's not perfect by any means, but they have a bill now that is an exception for competition. So if you're a competitor, the idea behind this bill is if you're a competitor in any recognized shooting sport. So the language I don't think is perfect in this regards on the bill, but basically the idea is if there's a state agency that looks at a shooting sport and recognizes that as a valid shooting sport, so it's 3-gun, it's USPSA, any type of league, and if you are participating in those leagues and you say, I am either preparing for or I am participating in these, you now have a rebuttable presumption that your possession of that that standard capacity magazine is legit. So I've had a lot of people say to me, like, well, nobody checks those things now. Anyway, nobody cares. And that's fine. They can go by just believing that that's always going to be the case. For us, we'd rather see belt and suspenders, and we think it's important that there actually be, no question that you have the legal right to possess those tools. And we see this as the first step, but we see it as an important step to being able to make sure that that the direction that we've seen Colorado go so we can kind of see things move back the right direction in Colorado, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, I have a lot of thoughts on this because I'm, I was born and raised in Colorado, lived there for 36 years, and left 4 more freedom loving states. And part of it was because of this, in this magazine ban went through in 2012. Here we are in 2022. It's 10 years later, and nothing has happened as far as getting it repealed. So I'll say, from my perspective, ideally there would be no sort of restrictions on magazines whatsoever in any state, right? But I do see that there is a problem with letting good be the enemy of great. This is an exemption that like you said, while may not be perfect, the law should just be repealed. It's the first thing we've seen in 10 years that's going to do anything about it whatsoever. So
yeah, and And to be fair, there are folks almost every year that try and bring a full mag ban repeal. And it's tough to get traction with that in a state like Colorado, where you guys are, it's as purple as it is. And so what I think this bill, how it's different, is that this bill's got an opportunity to actually get traction on both sides of the aisle. And that's where I'm hoping, if you are a competitor or if you're a gun owner in Colorado, I think this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to show up at the legislature and say, look, we are competitors. We are absolutely in your state. We're here in force. We're real. And this is the opportunity to have our voices heard on a larger scale. If you don't think that a bill like this goes far enough, that's okay. Show up and tell the legislature that you don't think that a bill like this goes far enough. I think the worst thing that could happen on this bill, and I've already heard some discussion about this, is folks saying, this isn't real. It's not good enough. We're not going to show up. It's some kind of a, ploy by the state to figure out who has high capacity magazines, all sorts of, honestly, kind of out there conspiracy theories. I will tell you, if we do not show up and talk about this, it's not going to get better. And to be frank, there's no guarantee that this bill is going to go anywhere. But it certainly doesn't go anywhere if people won't write in, if people won't talk to their state senator, to their state representative. And the nice thing about this, there's never been a better time to be active in the legislature and still be lazy than right now. Because right now, you can literally go to the committee meeting when this comes out. You can sign up online on a Zoom meeting, and you can sit in your house and play checkers until the committee meeting starts. And then when it's your turn, you can just raise your hand and for 10 seconds just say, you know what? I'm a competitive shooter. This is important. It's important to me. And be done. And the more people that we can get to do that, the better chance we've got of seeing things change in Colorado. And I'm hopeful that people will take the opportunity to make their voices heard. Because again, these things don't get better if you don't make your voices heard. And the best way to do that is respectfully. It is to sit down with these legislators who may not believe the same things that you do. And to look them in the eye and say, look, I'm going to respect you. Your opinion is different than mine. But you may not know the whole story. Let me teach you about competitive shooting. Let me talk to you about who we are and what we do. You do those things, then you can win converts. You can bring people over to your side. If we sit in a cave and just throw insults, we're never going to get the ground back that we've lost. And so, it's important. Be involved in politics. The way you do that is by talking to your neighbor. It's by talking to the people that represent you. You are their constituent. You may not have voted for them, but it doesn't matter. Once they won that election, they have an obligation to listen to you. They have an obligation to consider your opinion. So make your voice heard and tell them that your expectation is, you work for me now. Politicians need to hear that.
Totally agree. Seems like they forget that quite often. Well, so on that note, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions about that specific piece of legislation?
Absolutely. I'll do my best to respond with the caveat that, once again, like I said, we look at a piece of legislation like this as this is the start. This is not an end zone dance. This is a kickoff for us to start working on decent legislation and start proposing how it could be better. So go ahead, Dave.
Right. Well, so before I ask my questions here, let me just pile on to that. I think there's this like I said, don't let good be the enemy of great. I think there's this sort of perception of we won't take any sort of action unless it's 100% repeal the NFA, repeal all these laws, et cetera, et cetera. And while I think that's cool and I'm all aboard on that, I don't think that's the only thing that should be done, because these discussions are going to happen with or without you. And it's like having your fate being decided by someone else when you could have sat down at that table and had a say in it, but now you're not going to because you're taking the quote unquote moral high ground.
Yeah.
I don't like compromise, and I don't like that anti-gun people work tirelessly to chip away at our rights. So when we can chip back the correct direction, we can move the ball. I think that's a good thing. So I'll just say that one right there.
You're right. We have to do that. Like, that's the key right there. If you think that we're losing our gun rights, there is we have to be careful not to lose everything in one fell swoop, but that's not how they're being taken away. They're being taken away bite by bite.
Yeah.
And once in a while, you got to try and get somebody to spit a bite. You got to try and get them to spit a bite back up. You got to try and get some back. And so, yeah, we need to work on it on a grander scale and see if we can have a long-term strategy that gets us where we want to go. But at the same time, if there are little battles, like, fight the little battles.
Mm-hmm. So this is a bill that's been introduced. Now, I'm not familiar with the way it works in Colorado. I think I probably knew this once upon a time, but didn't really look it up before our conversation here, just because I don't live in Colorado anymore. But is it possible that after the discussion of this bill next week, as we're speaking about this, which is February 8th, is it possible that there could be tweaks to the language in this?
Absolutely. So what you're going to see happen with a bill, the bill gets drafted by, what happens is a sponsor comes with an idea for the bill. They try and find co-sponsors, other people that say, like, yeah, we like this concept. We're okay with it. They get an attorney who works for the legislature to then, they say, the sponsor says, this is my concept. An attorney drafts the bill that he thinks meets what that legislator wants to have happen. So that language, that first batch of language that comes out is, a few people talking and then writing down, some, sentences, paragraphs, whatever, that get them to what they think they're going to get, to their intent. Once that happens, now that bill, it's not done. That bill now, first it has to get introduced. This bill's been introduced. It's got a bill number, so it's made it through the first steps. It's not dead. That's a big plus. It's alive. This bill's going to get a committee hearing. A committee hearing is a big deal. A committee hearing is your opportunity to weigh in and say what's good and bad about the bill. And rest assured, it's when the opposition is going to show up and try and say what they think is good about it or bad about the bill. People that don't like firearms and just don't think you should own guns, they're going to ask that this bill never leave committee. They're going to want this bill to be, what we call it, killed in committee. And so the committee is a subgroup of legislators that are going to get together and they're going to listen to witnesses, which are proponents and opponents, talk about what they do and don't like about the bill. So that's our opportunity to weigh in and say, this is what's good about the bill. This is what's bad. We like this word. We don't like that one. We like the concept. We don't like that. That's going to come through the testimony. After you have testimony in the bill, the legislature will have an opportunity, that committee will have an opportunity to edit the bill. And so they're going to be able to go in and they're going to be able to propose changes to that bill. So those changes, all those things that we do or don't like about the bill, that's where the legislator gets to listen to what you think and then propose a change. Those changes, they use parliamentary procedure, they'll vote on the changes. And then after the committee is done with the bill, you'll get a new version of the bill, a changed version of the bill. That then they will now vote on the changed version of the bill and decide whether that bill lives or dies. They're going to decide whether that bill comes out of committee or not. So if the bill comes out of committee, the bill will have an opportunity to then be voted on by the entire House. So you got to get past the first committee, pass changes in the first committee. Then the bill is going to move on to the House. On the floor of the House, so the House of Representatives, the legislature then is going to get another opportunity to swat at this bill, to do the sausage making all over again, to change things in the bill, to make the bill better, to make the bill worse, and ultimately decide whether the bill lives or dies yet again. If the bill gets through committee If the bill gets through the House, the bill will then cross over and go from the House of Representatives to the Senate in Colorado, where another group of legislators will get an opportunity to debate the bill, amend the bill, change language, add language, move it through the process again, and then ultimately to the Senate floor, where they will do the exact same thing all over again. So you've got multiple opportunities for people to work this bill. So if you think this bill needs to be bigger and do more, that happens in working the bill. That happens in keeping the bill alive and keeping people talking about the bill. If you lose the momentum and people won't talk about it anymore, the bill dies, the opportunity to make the change dies, it goes away, and you're right where you started out. That's why this process, when I say, you can't give up on a bill right now. That's why you have to grab an opportunity like this right at the beginning, and you have to start working that opportunity. Because if you give up on the opportunity right now, you said, give up on the good to get the perfect or whatever it was. You're right. You never get the perfect if you look at a bill that doesn't meet everything that you want on the first day and you throw that bill away. Because no bill starts that way. And if you're not willing to be on board and argue these things throughout, like you will be at the mercy of the people that were tenacious enough to argue the things all the way through. That's why we as a community, we as a shooting sports community, when we get an opportunity like this, we got to grab on with both hands and we got to ride it out. Because if we don't do it, we'll lose the chance. And the people that are our enemies, their primary goal on a bill like this will be to see it die in the first committee. Because the longer an idea stays alive, the more it can grow, the more opportunity it has to become what we want it to become. And that's something that they don't want it to become. That's why it's important to be involved.
Got it. So I guess just for full disclosure, I did put a post out on Facebook asking for people who are interested to or in testifying to reach out, and I would connect them with Nephi. Several people said, "Hey, look, this doesn't do enough, or we're happy with the way it is. I don't like that it has a state agency. I think they're going to create a registry of competitors," which I did not read that in there at all. So I thought that was kind of silly. And but again, like if you just look at something like that and refuse to participate, it's going to happen whether you're there or not. So if you want your opinion to be a part of it, it behooves you to be a part of it and raise your hand.
Yeah, show up and say what you don't like about it. And the cool thing is, you tell people to reach out to me. Like the really cool part about this is people literally can, look, go on the state website, look for House Bill 1145 and it'd be, you have to look at the right calendar year. So 22/11/45 in Colorado. And then, get on there, look at the calendar. Like you can sign up to testify on this bill, and you should sign up to testify on this bill. And you should tell legislators if there's something about the bill that doesn't go far enough, the first thing you need to do is say, this concept has waited way too long to get here. It's the right thing to do to make some changes to this because the law isn't, it's a dumb law. And then tell people after you tell them that you like the concept, tell them what you don't like about the law. Tell them what you don't like about the language. If you think that, there's something there that bothers you, share your ideas. Because the best thing that can happen, the worst thing that can happen is that they don't think you're right and that they kill the bill. The best thing that can happen is that members of that committee think you're right and they make the change that you asked for. And the bill continues to move on. We don't do that unless we participate in the discussion right now. Participate in the discussion.
I love it. All right. So if folks are, if you're in Colorado or you're around Colorado, be sure to pay attention to that one. I will put a link in the show notes to HB 22/1145. And Act fast. By the way, Nephi, they have a photo of Perry Will, the sponsor of this one, and this guy has the most Western mustache I have ever seen.
Yeah, Perry's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Ever since we've been inviting legislators to come, you remember the governor's match event, he's come and represented Colorado. He's a former game warden. He looks like Yosemite Sam, kind of, if Yosemite Sam, gained about 100 pounds. And I love the guy. He's phenomenal. He's a neat dude and really neat guy. And he has the best of intentions in bringing this bill. Like I said, it's a unique opportunity for us to have this conversation in Colorado. And again, when Perry talked with people about bringing this, he had legislators on both sides of the aisle that said, yeah, I'd like to have that conversation. There's validity to it. So that's different than some of the MAG ban repeals that we've seen in the past that have been uniquely one-sided. This one, you don't have to get all R's to make this happen. You can get some D's too. And I just think that that's a unique opportunity in Colorado. It's one that we shouldn't look at lightly because ultimately everybody needs to remember about these firearms issues is, you know what? Guns aren't Democrats or Republicans. They don't care. Shooting sports aren't Democrats or Republicans. These things are things that belong to everybody. If we can get them away from, being held hostage to party politics, it behooves us to do so as gun owners. And at the end of the day, 14 million people bought firearms for the first time over the last couple of years that never owned a gun before. Those people were primarily Democrats and independents. We need to find a way to get those people on our side in these arguments. If we don't do that, we're in trouble. If we do it, we get the things back that we've lost, and that's the goal for us.
I love it. So Nephi, what else is going on in the local legislative world that we need to pay attention to?
So pay attention to that one. Of course, there's a House Bill 1178 in Colorado. That bill is hunter's education in schools. That's huge because if we can familiarize people with firearms and in any opportunity to educate people, that's going to be positive. In Idaho, if you're in the state of Idaho, there's a state bill, Senate Bill 1262. And basically that bill, we call it a rights protection bill. Senate Bill 1262 says if there's an emergency, the government can't seize your firearms in an emergency.
Nice.
And so, believe it or not, that's a thing. It's very important. It keeps people from shutting down your ranges, your gun stores, things like that. If there's a declared emergency, we've all seen that that's not such a crazy, we've seen the pandemic. We've lived through it. So if you live in Nebraska, support Nebraska's Bill 773. That's constitutional concealed carry. In South Dakota, for those of you that hunt predators, there's a SB 73 allows you to hunt predators on public lands at night with night vision and thermal. I love that bill.
Nice.
So SB 73 in South Dakota. SB 175 is the governor's range bill. And then SB 182, the Financial Firearms Industry Non-Discrimination Act. That's a big one. In Utah, the FIND Act is working there. Doesn't have a name yet. And then in Wyoming, also look at the FIND Act, hopefully 2.0 coming there sometime in the near future. So that's what's going on in your neck of the woods.
Fantastic. Well, Nephi, I appreciate you calling in and giving us that update. As we spoke about when you were on the podcast just a couple of weeks ago, state legislative things happen quickly. So, folks, if you're if you like this type of content, Nephi and I are going to keep doing it and keep you informed on the things that are happening in state legislators. And Nephi, I appreciate you taking
about national stuff every once in a while, just so it doesn't get too boring.
Oh yeah, we always want to talk about national stuff, but like you said, I don't know. For me, like I always feel like national, it's just some sort of weird cesspool of 500 people over there just deciding everything for the nation. Whereas on the state level, I think you can really move the ball because there are people that have to live next door to you and actually pay attention to what you're saying. I don't know. Maybe that's a pessimist sort of view, but
man, two phone calls to every legislator. That's all it takes, literally. You'd be surprised how far your voice goes at the local level. So make it heard. Make the call.
Yeah, stand up and be counted. Well, Nephi, thank you. Thanks for the update, dude. I totally appreciate it. Want to have you back on anytime you got more stuff that you want to talk about, that we need to be paying attention to, and appreciate what you're doing out there for us, man. Thank you.
Take it easy, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the 3 Gun Show. If you're interested in any of the bills that we talked about here, check out the show notes, 3gunshow.com/317, and I'll have all those listed in there, then you can just Google them from there if you're in one of those states. If you have any questions or anything like that for Nephi, just go ahead and make a comment on the blog there. Again, 3gunshow.com/317, and we'll try to get them to answer them in the future. Always appreciate you listening. Thanks for tuning in every week. We'll talk to you soon. Oh, and we'll see you on the range.